Today's story is so powerful, it reminds us how love is sometimes born from fear. Set in the unforgiving lands of the Old West, where the wind remembers every sin and every promise. It's a place where solitude becomes a shield, and where destiny waits for the moment two lives intersect. This story begins with a woman who should have frozen to death, and a man who should have turned her away but didn't. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The cold settled hard over Crosswind Ridge after sundown, tightening around the land until every plank in Eli Boone's cabin gave a low, weary creak. The wind rose just before nightfall, sharp, relentless, and Eli felt it cut through his coat as he crossed the yard with an armload of freshly split firewood held tight against his chest. His boots sank into frozen patches of earth, each step sending a faint crunch into the dark. His breath drifted out in pale bursts. He moved with care, not from age, but from the lingering limp left by a horse that had crushed his leg years earlier. Since then, he measured every step. Slow when he could be. Quick only when danger demanded it. Eli had lived alone for 9 years. The silence around the cabin was heavy but familiar, something he understood well enough not to fight. These days, his only concern was surviving each winter without losing the roof, the cattle, or the land his father had broken with his own hands. He never sought company. Folks in town knew better than to expect conversation from him, not after the fire that had taken his younger brother, Jack Boone. Grief settled deep in his chest, a weight he never learned to name, so he stopped trying to explain it. Work said enough. He reached the woodpile and bent to drop the logs. That was when his body locked. Something was crouched low beside the pile. For a split second, his heartbeat slammed hard against his ribs. His face stayed still, but tension climbed through his shoulders, jaw tightening as instinct took over. The kind earned from years on the trail and long nights expecting trouble where none should be. He waited, eyes adjusting to the lantern glow spilling from the cabin doorway behind him. A woman sat curled on the frozen ground, knees drawn tight, arms wrapped around herself. She barely moved, breathing shallow and uneven, her shoulders trembling with each breath. Her long dark hair was matted with dust. Her dress was torn open at the neckline and split along one hip, as if she had fought her way through brush, or someone else. Her feet were bare, scraped raw, toes stiff and pale with cold. Eli's first thought came sharp and immediate. She was freezing. If she stayed out there much longer, she wouldn't last the hour. The second thought followed just as quickly. She was afraid of him. Her eyes lifted slowly, wide and unfocused at first, then sharpened when she realized he was a stranger. The fear in her face wasn't wild or dramatic. It was the exhausted kind, born after days of running when there was no strength left to hide it. She swallowed and whispered, her voice rough with cold and dust. Warmth. Just warmth. Eli didn't answer right away. His mind moved the way it always did, slow, steady, weighing what mattered. She wasn't armed. She was half frozen, young, maybe mid-20s, and she had been outside long enough that her feet had nearly turned blue. He stepped past her, not rushed, not threatening, just deliberate. He pulled the cabin door open wider, letting the light spill across the yard. Inside, he said quietly. She didn't move. It struck him then that she might expect a trick, or worse, that once she crossed the threshold, he'd throw her back out. Someone had already done that to her. Eli held the door open a moment longer. When she realized he wasn't waiting to strike or shout, she forced herself up, one leg shaking, and followed the warmth. Inside, Naya stopped just beyond the doorway, careful not to assume anything more than she'd been offered. She clutched her torn dress closed at the chest where the fabric had split, the curve of her body briefly exposed. Eli noticed the tear, but kept his eyes on the stove. Another rip along her hip revealed dirt-darkened skin and bruises beneath. Everything about her posture spoke of survival, fear and instinct carrying her for hours, maybe days. He closed the door softly, sealing out the wind. The sound made Naya flinch. Eli saw it and slowed his movements without a word. She stood near the table, still shaking. "My name," she said carefully, "is Naya." Eli nodded once. He didn't give his own name. He rarely did unless pressed. He set a tin cup on the table, filled it with warm water from the pot on the stove, and slid it toward her without stepping close. She took it in both hands, fingers trembling, and drank. Eli lowered himself into a chair across the room, far enough to give her space, close enough to watch for injury. Naya drank slowly, her throat moving with each swallow. He could see how desperately she needed the warmth. With every passing minute, her shoulders dropped a fraction as the heat reached her. After a long silence, she spoke again. "I worked for the Harlan family." Her voice tightened. "When their cattle died, when their baby grew sick, they blamed me, said I brought bad things." She shook her head. "I did nothing. They cast me out." Eli stared at the stove, jaw clenched. He didn't ask for more. He didn't need it. He recognized the look people wore when they decided someone else would carry their guilt. He spoke again at last. "You can warm yourself here tonight." Naya's eyes softened, relief slipping in alongside cautious doubt. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli Boone wasn't certain why he had said it. Maybe it was the way she looked, half broken by cold. Maybe it was the weight of years spent in silence finally pressing back on him. Or maybe he knew, plain and simple, that sending her away in that condition would have been no different than leaving her to die. He hadn't saved anyone in a long time. He hadn't tried to. Yet something about the way she stood there, shaking, frightened, but still carrying herself with quiet dignity, pushed him to choose otherwise. He handed her a blanket, moving slow enough not to startle her. She wrapped it around her shoulders, and when the warmth seeped in, she let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for hours. Eli settled back into his chair, not at ease, just alert. Naya remained at the table, the tin cup cradled between her hands, watching him with careful attention. She was deciding whether he could be trusted. He was deciding how long she could stay without undoing the solitude he'd built his life around. Outside, the wind rattled the weather vane again. Inside, two people who had learned not to rely on the world sat facing each other in a silence that felt strange, but not hostile. Neither spoke it aloud, but both understood this night would set everything else in motion. The fire burned steady through the dark hours, casting a low amber glow along the cabin walls while the wind scraped and worried the boards outside. Eli stayed awake longer than usual, seated in his old wooden chair, elbows resting on his knees. He kept his breathing slow, eyes on the woman sleeping near the stove beneath one of his blankets. Exhaustion had taken her quickly, the kind that overwhelms fear, but every so often she shifted, her brow creasing, fingers tightening in the wool, as if expecting the warmth to be torn away. Eli didn't know what to do with any of it. Letting someone stay went against the way he'd lived for nearly a decade, yet turning her out had felt wrong in a way he couldn't ignore. He rubbed his thumb along the frayed edge of his sleeve, weighing choices he'd long avoided making. Letting her inside had been the easy part. What followed was uncertain. Naya's breathing evened out slowly. When she moved, her torn dress slipped, exposing more of her chest through the ripped neckline. The fabric stretched thin where it clung to her curves. Eli looked once, then deliberately turned his gaze away, giving her the respect she hadn't been shown out in the cold. Still, he saw the bruises along her hip where the tear revealed skin. Marks that hadn't come from a fall. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave them. His jaw tightened. The anger surprised him, sharp and unwelcome. Near midnight, she jolted awake, eyes wide and unfocused, breath catching hard. Eli lifted his head slightly. "You're safe," he said quietly. The words felt unfamiliar on his tongue, too gentle for a man who rarely spoke at all. Naya blinked, steadying herself. She nodded and lowered her head again, pulling the blanket closer. "You don't have to stay awake," she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. Eli gave a small shrug. "Storm's loud. Hard to sleep when the walls won't stop shaking." That wasn't the truth. He'd slept through worse. Storms, coyotes, cattle breaking fences. What kept him awake was her presence, her fear, the bruises she carried. He didn't know where she'd come from, but he recognized danger when he saw its aftermath, and whatever she'd fled from hadn't ended. Naya watched him carefully. "You didn't ask who was chasing me." "Didn't need to," he replied. She dropped her gaze to her hands. "The Harlan family blamed me for things I didn't do. The animals were already sick. The baby was weak from birth, but they needed someone to blame." She swallowed hard. "Their son tried to touch me." Her voice tightened. "I pushed him away. After that, everything became my fault." Eli absorbed it without reaction. Inside, something settled into place, a quiet decision forming without words. He despised men who used power to corner those who had none. He'd seen enough of it across Texas to know the pattern. "They think I cursed them," Naya whispered. "They said I carry bad luck." Eli shook his head once. "You walked here through the cold," he said. "That isn't bad luck." He met her eyes. "That's survival." The words struck harder than he expected. Naya's lips parted slightly, as if she didn't know how to answer someone treating her story as truth instead of superstition. She eased back down, resting her head on her arm, the firelight steady against the shadows. Her hair spilled loose across the blanket as Eli Boone finally rose, stretching the stiffness from his joints, and moved toward the narrow cot he used during the coldest weeks. He didn't lie down right away. He paused, watching her one last time, making sure her breathing stayed slow and even. "Sleep," he said quietly. "I'll take the cot." Naya shifted, turning slightly toward him. The blanket slid lower across her chest, the torn fabric parting enough to reveal the soft line of her skin. Eli looked away at once, fixing his attention on the lantern instead. The sight had caught him off guard, not because of want, though the flicker was there, but because of how exposed she looked. Vulnerable in a way that stirred a protective instinct deeper than he expected. "You don't trust me yet," she said softly. "I don't expect you to," Eli replied. "Do you trust me?" she asked. Eli eased down onto the cot. The springs creaked under his weight. "I trust what I can see." Naya studied his face, searching it. "And what do you see?" He didn't answer, not because he lacked one, but because saying it out loud felt too direct, too soon. Eli closed his eyes, letting the heat from the stove and the weight of the long day settle into his bones. Naya watched him a moment longer, her expression easing. Firelight flickered gently across the cabin, steady and warm. For the first time in years, Eli wasn't alone beneath his roof. For the first time in days, Naya wasn't outside fighting the cold. Neither slept deeply, but neither felt entirely unsafe. It was a beginning. The storm faded before dawn, leaving the land wrapped in a heavy, frozen quiet that made every sound inside the cabin feel sharper. At first light, Eli Boone pushed himself up from the cot, rubbing the stiffness from his leg before planting his feet on the floor. The fire had burned low, but enough coals remained to send a faint warmth across the room. Naya lay curled near the stove beneath the blanket, her breathing deeper, calmer than the night before. For a moment, Eli simply stood there, watching the steady rise and fall of her shoulders. It had been years since anyone else had slept under his roof. He'd expected irritation, maybe discomfort, but instead felt something more complicated, an awareness of her presence, of the quiet she brought, of the fact that he hadn't faced the night alone. He didn't fully trust that feeling, but he didn't push it away either. He lit the lantern and set water to heat. The soft clink of metal stirred Naya awake. She blinked slowly, the way someone does when safety isn't yet certain. When her eyes met his, tension flashed through her. "It's morning," Eli said, keeping his voice steady. Naya sat up, holding the blanket close to cover the torn neckline of her dress. Her hair fell over one shoulder, tangled but soft in the lantern light. She glanced at the door, then back at him, as if gauging whether daylight meant she'd be sent away. "You can sit," Eli said, nodding toward the table. She hesitated, then slipped onto the bench. The blanket stayed wrapped around her, but the movement pulled the rip along her hip open again, exposing bruised skin. Eli noticed and turned back to the stove, giving her space. Naya watched him in silence, noting the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, no wasted motion. Nothing impulsive. He decided before he acted. That steadiness eased something in her chest. Eli poured warm water into 2 tin cups. "Drink. It'll help." She accepted it with both hands. The heat seeped into her fingers, drawing out a slow breath. After a moment, she said, "You still haven't told me your name." "Eli," he answered. She nodded once. Now she had a name for the man whose silence hadn't felt cruel, only guarded. Eli sat across from her, forearms resting on the table. "You planning on going back to that family?" Her response was immediate, a sharp shake of her head. "They'd kill me," she said quietly, "or sell me to someone worse." Her eyes dropped. "I need somewhere no one knows me." Eli studied her. She wasn't lying. The fear in her voice was one he recognized, the same raw edge he'd carried after Jack Boone died, when every stranger felt like a threat. He didn't like the thought of her wandering alone again, but he also didn't know what keeping her would cost. He set his cup down with a soft thud. "You're not walking out in this cold." "Not today." Naya looked up, startled. "You mean, I can stay?" "Until you get your strength back," Eli said. "Then we'll see." Her shoulders eased, though relief wasn't the only thing in her eyes. There was tension in her as well, tight, restless, born from not knowing how long she would be allowed to stay, or whether the safety he offered came with an unseen edge. Eli Boone noticed it. "The cabin needs work," he said after a pause. "Loose shingles on the roof. Chicken pens are leaning. I'll be outside most of the day." Naya nodded. She understood what he was giving her, not just shelter, but structure, a sense of what came next. "I can help," she said quietly. Eli lifted an eyebrow. "You barely made it through the cold." "I can still work," she insisted. "I can cook, clean. I won't be a burden." He didn't tell her she already wasn't. He just studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Do what you can inside. That's enough." Her eyes dropped, gratitude settling deep. Eli pulled on his coat and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, biting hard. Before stepping out, he paused. "If you hear anything strange, coyotes, wind on the boards, don't rush the door," he said. "Stay by the stove." Naya blinked, then understood. "You think someone followed me?" Eli didn't deny it. People who blame others for their own failures don't quit easy. Her grip tightened on the blanket, pulse quickening. "Do you think he'll come here?" Eli took a slow breath, scanning the ridge the way he had every morning for years. "Probably not," he said. "But I've been wrong before." Worry settled hard in her chest. Eli met her gaze. "You're safe," he said. "I'll see to that." He stepped outside and shut the door with a quiet click. Naya remained seated, listening to the crunch of his boots on frozen ground. She'd known him less than a day. Still, something about his steadiness, his silence, his refusal to question her innocence, pulled her out of a fear she'd been trapped in for months. She rose slowly, pressing a hand to her bruised hip, and looked around the cabin with new eyes. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just surviving. Someone was trying to keep her alive. Eli spent most of the morning on the roof, hammering loose shingles back into place as the cold wind pressed against him. Each movement sent a dull ache through his injured leg, but he worked through it, steady, quiet, more focused on the land than the pain. Every few minutes, his eyes lifted to the ridgeline, searching for tracks, riders, anything out of place. Out here, habit, caution, and survival were the same thing. Below, Naya stayed inside. The door stood cracked just enough for her to hear him moving. Once the stove warmed the room, she shed the blanket and slipped into one of Eli's shirts. It hung loose to her thighs, cinched awkwardly at the waist with a strip of rawhide she'd found in a drawer. As she moved, it slid off one shoulder, exposing her collarbone. Bruises marked her arm, and the fabric didn't quite close over her chest. She kept adjusting it, not from modesty, but because she wasn't used to clothes that didn't bind tight. She gathered the few dishes he owned, washed them in warm water, wiped the table clean. Every few minutes, she paused to listen for the tap of his hammer or the thud of his boots. Each sound steadied her. Each silence tightened her stomach. Eli noticed her watching from below but didn't call down. He didn't know how to talk to someone who'd nearly frozen the night before. He didn't know how to talk much at all. Still, seeing her move through his cabin, hearing the soft clatter of dishes, stirred something he hadn't felt in years. A sense that the place wasn't as empty today as it had been yesterday. By midday, he climbed down with careful steps. Naya stepped outside when she saw him. Wind lifted her hair, the hem of Eli's shirt brushing her thighs. "You finished?" she asked. Her voice was still cautious but steadier than before. "Roof won't leak," Eli said. "Won't blow off either." She nodded. "You should rest your leg." He didn't ask how she knew. She noticed small things, the way he shifted his weight, how he moved differently coming down the ladder. "You eat yet?" he asked. She shook her head. He frowned slightly. "Why not?" "I waited," she said. "You brought me food. I should make you food." She hesitated, then added, "That's how I was taught." Eli rubbed a hand along his jaw. He wasn't used to anyone doing things for him, not since Jack Boone had died. The thought of someone cooking for him felt strange, almost unsettling. "You don't owe me anything," Eli Boone said. Naya lowered her eyes. "I know. I still want to." Eli didn't argue. He stepped aside and let her pass. As she moved, the oversized shirt slipped again. A narrow line of skin showing along her side where the rawhide tie failed to hold tight. Eli turned his gaze away before she noticed. Inside, she worked with quiet intent, cutting dried meat, warming beans, stirring the pot with a patience born of weariness and care. Eli sat in his usual chair, watching the firelight ripple across the metal pot, listening to the soft sounds of her movements. The cabin filled with the smell of warm food for the first time in a long while. When she finally set 2 plates on the table, she hesitated, unsure whether she should sit with him or keep her distance. Eli tapped the chair across from him. She took it. They ate in silence. Only the scrape of spoons and the low crackle of the fire filled the space. Halfway through the meal, Naya's eyes shifted toward the window. Eli followed her gaze. The snow wasn't deep, but the ground lay clear enough to show anything new. A single line of tracks cut across the far edge of the yard. Not coyote, not stray cattle. Boot prints. Eli set his spoon down slowly. "You said no one should be near," Naya whispered, her voice tightening. "They shouldn't be," Eli said, already rising. He went to the door at an even pace, not rushed, measuring. The tracks came in from the north, curved near the corral, then vanished toward the trees. 1 man, maybe 2. Hard to tell. Naya stepped up behind him, breath shallow. "They found me." "Maybe," Eli said. "Could be someone passing through." She shook her head. "No one passes through here. You told me that." Eli didn't answer. She was right. He stepped outside, crouched, and pressed 2 fingers into the snow beside the prints. The edges weren't frozen. Fresh. Very fresh. His pulse picked up, not enough to show, but enough to settle a familiar tension in his chest. He didn't scare easily, but he didn't like strangers circling his land without knocking. He stood and scanned the ridge again. Nothing moved. Naya remained in the doorway, wind tugging at Eli's shirt, her bare legs below the hem, fear tightening her grip on the frame. "Are they coming back?" she asked. Eli met her eyes. "Not while I'm here." It wasn't bravado or comfort. It was a promise. He stepped inside and shut the door. He checked both window latches, then reached up and took down the rifle above the doorway. He didn't make a show of it, just slid a cartridge in with the practiced quiet of a man who'd done it too many times. Naya watched him, eyes wide. "I brought danger to you," she said. "No," Eli replied. "They brought danger by chasing you." Her throat tightened. She took a small step closer, one hand clutching the loose shirt at her chest as if it could steady her fear. "Eli, if they come," she swallowed, "will you send me away?" He looked at her fully then, the shirt slipping off one shoulder, her breath uneven, fear and something like shame sharp in her eyes. He held her gaze without blinking. "No," he said. "You stay." Her breath trembled. Relief, fear, gratitude. Everything hit her at once. Eli glanced back towards the window. "After we eat, I'm checking the ridge." "I'll come," she said at once. "No," Eli answered. "Your feet can't take the cold, and if someone's watching, I don't want them seeing you." She didn't argue. Not because she agreed, but because she understood. Eli returned to the table and finished his meal slowly, controlled, as if nothing had changed. But Naya knew better. Something had changed. Something that mattered. Eli Boone had taken responsibility for her safety, which meant the ridge, the tracks, and whoever made them were his concern now, not hers alone. The cabin felt different after that. Warmer, heavier, safer. Just after noon, Eli left the cabin with the rifle over his shoulder, purpose set firm in his chest. He made no effort to hide. The sky was pale and clear, winter blue, the kind that carried sound a long way. Naya stood in the doorway, Eli Boone's oversized shirt cinched tight at her waist, watching him cross the yard with slow, deliberate steps. She didn't call out. She knew better than to waste words when danger hovered close. Eli walked the perimeter first, stopping again at the fresh boot prints. He crouched, studying their depth and spacing, the direction they'd come from, his brow tightening. Whoever had been there wasn't wandering. They'd paused, watched, considered something, knocking, breaking in, or taking Naya. He straightened and followed the trail toward the tree line, each step measured. His limp showed more on the uneven ground, but he pushed through it. Pain was familiar. Pain didn't slow him. Inside the cabin, Naya kept the fire steady. She focused on what she could control, folding blankets, wiping the table, checking the window latches, but every creak made her breath hitch. She listened for boots, for voices, for a gunshot. Anything that meant danger had found them. After a while, she sat on the edge of Eli's chair, pulling the shirt tighter around herself. The loose fabric slipped again, revealing her shoulder and the soft curve of her chest. She noticed only when a cold draft brushed her skin, and she didn't fix it right away. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Back on the men who chased her into the cold, the lies they told, the sudden violence in their anger. She swallowed and pressed a hand to her bruised hip. "Don't come back," she whispered, though she knew men like that didn't stop until they got what they wanted, or lost what they believed they owned. Outside, Eli's boots returned. Naya stood at once. When Eli stepped inside, she saw it immediately. No panic, no fear, just certainty. He'd seen something he didn't like. "What did you find?" she asked. Eli locked the door before answering. He set the rifle aside and brushed snow from his coat sleeve. "One man," he said. "Maybe two. They didn't head back toward town." Her breath caught. "North leads to the road." "They circled the ridge and cut that way," he said. "They weren't passing through. They walked slow, stopped twice." He met her eyes. They wanted to be seen. "To scare me," she said, stepping back until she bumped the table. Eli stepped forward, not fast, not threatening, just enough to show she wasn't alone. "I've dealt with men like that," he said. "They push first, see who flinches. If nobody does, they get meaner." Heat rose behind her eyes. Fear mixed with exhaustion she didn't have room for anymore. "They won't stop," she said. "They didn't stop when I begged. They didn't stop when I ran." Eli's jaw tightened. He wasn't a man for comfort, but something in her voice pulled the words from him anyway. "You're not alone now." She swallowed. "I don't want you hurt because of me." He didn't answer at once. He looked around the cabin, the worn floorboards, the table he built with Jack Boone, the empty bed, the half of the room he'd kept untouched for years. Then he looked back at Naya, the shirt loose on her frame, fear flushing her cheeks, hair spilling over one shoulder, firelight catching her curves. "This place has been quiet too long," he said softly. "If trouble's coming, I'd rather meet it head-on than pretend the ridge is empty." She wasn't ready for that. Her eyes softened despite herself. Eli lifted the rifle and leaned it by the door. "I'm fortifying the shed. If someone comes looking, that's the first place they'll check. I want it solid." "I can help," she said. He glanced at her feet, scraped, tender. "No. You stay inside. If you hear anything, stay low. Keep the table between you and the door." She stepped closer. "Eli, I'm not hiding while you face them alone." "They're not here now," he said. "And when they come, if they come, I'll know first." Her breath shook as she exhaled. "You don't even know me." His voice dropped, steady and sure. I know what it looks like when someone's running because they had no choice. Something shifted inside her. Something steady took hold of her. Something warm. Something she hadn't felt since before the world hardened against her. Eli Boone wasn't gentle, wasn't soft, but he was honest, and that honesty cut through her fear. He turned toward the door. "I'll be outside for an hour," he said. "After that, we'll talk about what comes next." Without thinking, Naya reached for his arm. It was instinct, fear moving faster than thought. Her fingers closed around the sleeve of his coat. Eli stopped mid-step. The shirt she wore slipped off her shoulder again, the open neckline revealing the curve of her collarbone and the upper line of her chest. His breath caught once, just enough to show he noticed. Then he met her eyes. "Don't go far," she whispered. Eli held her gaze, long enough that the weight of his decision settled in the room like a shut door. "I won't," he said. He stepped outside and closed the door softly behind him. Naya stood there for a full minute, her hand still raised where she'd touched him. Her heart raced, not only from fear, but from something else. Something beginning. The afternoon light stretched low across the yard, pale and cold, throwing long shadows from fence posts and tools. Eli Boone returned from the shed with sawdust in his hair and dirt on his gloves, moving with the slow certainty of a man who had already chosen his course. His limp had worsened from the work, but he ignored it. Pain meant little compared to the knot tightening in his gut. He paused in the middle of the yard, scanning the ridge once more. Nothing stirred. No sound but wind brushing dry mesquite. Still he felt eyes on the land, somewhere beyond the brush, not close enough to shoot, close enough to warn. Naya pushed the cabin door open when she heard him. She stepped outside wearing Eli's shirt, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the rawhide tie barely holding the fabric snug at her waist. As she moved, the shirt slid down one shoulder, exposing the top of her breast where loose buttons failed to close. She crossed her arms to steady it. She seemed more self-conscious than the day before. "You were gone longer than an hour," she said quietly. Eli didn't answer right away, his eyes still on the ridge. Her breath caught. "You saw something." He shook his head. "Didn't see them, but they left something." She stepped closer, gripping the edge of the shirt. "What?" "A piece of rope," he said. "Cut clean." He finally looked at her. "Your people use knots like that, for hair ties." Naya froze. Cold air bit at her bare legs, but she didn't move. "That means they're not just settlers," Eli went on. "Could be ranch hands, scouts, or someone trying to scare you the Apache way because they think it'll work." Her voice tightened. "Cole Harlan, the one who blamed me. He hires men sometimes, small jobs, things he doesn't want his hands on." Eli's jaw locked. "He'll send them again." She closed her eyes briefly. "I never wanted to bring this to your land." "You didn't," Eli said. "He did." He walked past her into the cabin. Naya followed, shutting the door behind them. Eli hung his coat on the hook, then knelt and opened a wooden chest near the unused end of the room, the part he never touched. Naya went still. She had never seen it opened. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a worn pair of boots, and a shirt kept so carefully she knew at once who it belonged to. "Your brother," she whispered. Eli didn't lift his head. "I kept it clean. Never knew why." She stepped closer, slow, the shirt brushing her thighs. After a moment's hesitation, she knelt beside him. "He mattered to you." Eli closed the chest gently. Only family I had left, after the fire. He paused. I didn't want anyone in this cabin. Didn't want anyone touching what was his. He looked at her then, really looked at her. You being here, it's not the same. Not like anyone else. Naya lowered her eyes, unsure how to breathe for a moment. Eli stood and drew a slow breath. Danger's coming, he said. The kind that doesn't knock first. We're setting rules. She nodded, listening. Her throat tightened as she listened. You stay inside after dark, Eli Boone said. You don't answer the door unless I tell you to. Keep the lantern low, and if you hear a gunshot, one shot, you hide behind the back chimney and don't move. His voice never rose, but the weight of it settled deep in her chest. What about you? Naya asked. I'll be where they expect a man to be, Eli answered plainly. She stepped closer, near enough that he could see the bruise along her hip where the shirt had shifted. Firelight traced the line of her waist and the curve beneath the loose fabric. Eli's breath deepened, though he didn't step back. They don't stop, she whispered. Men like that don't stop until someone makes them. His expression stayed still, but something hardened behind his eyes. Something old he'd buried under years of work and silence. They'll stop, he said. I'll see to it. She searched his face. Are you doing this because you feel responsible, or because you want me safe? He didn't answer with words. He reached out slowly, hesitated only a beat, then closed his hand around her forearm. Gentle, warm, steady. Naya drew in a breath as his thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, feeling the controlled strength in his grip. I want you safe, he said at last, voice low. Her eyes softened, filling with warmth that wasn't fear. Without thinking, she stepped closer until her chest brushed his. Eli's jaw tightened, not in anger, but restraint. They'll come at night, she whispered. They always do. I know, he said. Neither moved. The fire snapped behind them, sending a wash of warm light across their faces. Eli finally released her wrist, but the closeness remained. The air shifted, warmer, tight with expectation. What do we do now? She asked. Eli turned toward the window. Now we make it clear this place isn't easy to take. He grabbed his hat and rifle. Naya caught his arm again, holding on for a heartbeat. Eli, don't leave me alone. His voice dropped, soft but steady. I won't. He stepped outside to draw a line in the dirt. No man was meant to cross. Naya stood in the doorway, watching him, feeling the first stirrings of something she hadn't felt in years. Trust. Dusk fell fast over Crosswind Ridge, not fading but dropping straight into cold shadow. Eli Boone spent the last hour of daylight reinforcing everything he could, dragging heavy timber to brace the shed doors, tightening the latch on the chicken pen, scattering loose gravel near the barn so footsteps would speak loud. He rolled an old barrel beneath a window where it would topple if anyone brushed past. He didn't talk while he worked. He rarely did. Every movement was deliberate. Every choice carried weight. Naya watched from the doorway, the shirt slipping off her shoulder again as the rawhide tie loosened with her movement. She didn't fix it. Her hands were shaking too much. Eli, she said quietly, you haven't eaten. I've got work first, he replied. You need strength. He kept raking gravel until the path lay rough with stone, a warning long before anyone reached the house. Inside, Naya moved softly, lighting only the lamp by the stove and keeping the windows dark. She stirred a pot of beans, though her thoughts wouldn't settle. Circling the same fear, the men who chased her, their voices, the way Cole Harlan had looked at her like something he owned. Each blink brought their faces back. When Eli finally stepped inside, The room warmed just from his presence. He shut the door. Firm, final. Not loud, not gentle. Naya turned, swallowing hard. You find more signs? Eli set his hat on the table. Only what I expected. They're close. Naya felt her chest tighten. How close? Eli Boone hung his coat on the hook, eyes steady. Close enough to come tonight. Her breath caught. They want you scared, he went on. They want me guessing. Naya stepped forward, fingers gripping the edge of the table. Then we should run. Eli shook his head once. Running only works when you've got nowhere worth staying. She blinked, understanding without him needing to explain. The cabin mattered. And so did she. Naya lowered her gaze, holding back the mix of fear and warmth rising in her chest. Eli moved past her, filled 2 bowls from the pot she'd kept warm, and set them on the table. They sat together. The silence wasn't cold. It was tight, heavy with waiting, with the weight of what night might bring. Naya pushed her food around, barely eating. You need strength, Eli said. I can't, she whispered. Try. She did, managing a small bite, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Eli reached across the table, hesitated a beat, then laid his hand gently over hers. Her breath hitched. You're safe, he said, calm and firm. No, she whispered. Not until they're gone. Eli squeezed her hand once. Then I'll make sure they're gone. Heat stung behind her eyes. Not fear, but certainty. He didn't say maybe or we'll see. He said I'll make sure. Eli Boone didn't make promises lightly, and he didn't offer answers he couldn't deliver. When they finished, Naya cleaned the bowls while Eli checked the rifle, sliding cartridges home with slow, practiced precision. Each click felt like cold water down her spine. Outside, darkness settled fully. No wind, no animals. Too still. Eli stood near the window, jaw tight, watching the yard. Naya wrapped her arms around herself. Tell me what to do. He didn't turn. Stay back from the windows. Keep low. If something happens, get behind the stove and don't move until I say. She nodded. Every part of her wanted to argue, to stand beside him, not hide while he faced danger alone. But she stepped closer instead. He turned then, meeting her eyes. Firelight traced the worry, the fatigue, the resolve in his face. You've done enough running, he said. Tonight I stand. Her breath trembled. She lifted a hand, hovering near his chest, unsure she had the right to touch him. Eli stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the way he did everything. Her fingers brushed his shirt. He didn't pull away. Naya, he said quietly. I'll keep you safe. Her voice broke. Why? He didn't soften it. You didn't deserve what happened to you. And I'm not letting it keep happening. The shirt shifted with her breathing, revealing more skin as she leaned into him, needing something solid. Eli's hands came up, resting on her shoulders, not pulling, not pushing, just steadying her. She pressed her forehead to his chest. His breath deepened, the closeness affecting him though his face stayed controlled. His thumbs brushed her collarbones, warm against her chilled skin. Then, outside, a crunch. One footstep. Naya tensed hard. Eli's grip tightened just enough to steady her. Behind the stove, he whispered. She didn't argue. She slipped into the shadows, heart pounding. Eli moved to the door, rifle in hand, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. Another step came, closer. Then a low voice outside. The words were unclear, but the tone was not friendly. Not a passerby. Purposeful. Naya clutched the stove, breathing fast. Eli glanced back once, meeting her eyes. He didn't say it'll be fine. He didn't say don't worry. He nodded. Slow, certain. She nodded back, trusting him with something she'd never trusted any man with before. Her life. As Eli took his position, fingers steady on the trigger, the night over Crosswind Ridge shifted into something dangerous. Something beginning. The knock wasn't a knock at all. A hard thud struck the door, followed by low voices and the crunch of boots shifting in the dirt. Eli Boone stood perfectly still, rifle angled down but ready, shoulders squared in the narrow entryway. The cabin lay in shadow, lit only by the faint glow of the stove. The silence inside was so tight Naya could hear her own pulse hammering in her ears. Another thud came, then a voice, deep and mocking. "Evening, rancher. Saw tracks leading this way. Figured we'd check on what you've been keeping." Naya's breath stalled. Eli didn't turn his head. He lifted one hand just enough to signal her to stay silent. She pressed herself tighter behind the stove, the shirt slipping again along her shoulder, loose fabric brushing her ribs with every panicked breath. The voice came closer. "You got someone in there with you, mister. Someone who belongs to another household." Eli finally answered, voice low and flat. "No one here belongs to anyone." A brief, unsettling laugh drifted through the door. "We'll see about that." Footsteps shifted. Snow crunched. More than one man. Eli stepped closer to the door, rifle now angled toward the sound. His heartbeat picked up, steady, strong, the way it had years ago when cattle thieves or drunken hands tried their luck. But this was different. This was his land, and this time it mattered. "You rode out here for nothing," Eli said. "Leave." A pause. Then the edge in the man's voice sharpened. "She stole from her employers. Probably cursed them too. You harbor her. You answer for it." Eli's jaw tightened. "She didn't steal, and you know damn well why you ran her off." Silence followed. Not peaceful, but heavy. The sound of a man realizing Eli wasn't guessing. He knew. Naya clapped a hand over her mouth. She knew that voice now. Cole Harlan. The one who cornered her in the barn. The one who lied when she shoved him away. Fear and anger twisted hard in her gut. "Open the door," Cole demanded. "We'll ask her ourselves." Eli didn't move. "No." "You think you can hide her?" Cole pressed. "She was paid for. She belongs nowhere near you," Eli cut in, his voice sharp for the first time. Boots scraped against the frame. Someone tested the handle. Naya's heart leapt into her throat. Eli raised the rifle, not to threaten, but to draw a line in the air. No one was crossing it alive. "You take one more step," he said, "and you lose it." A tight breath came from the other side. They weren't used to resistance. They weren't used to someone calling their bluff. Eli listened. One man to the left, one farther back, maybe a third who hadn't spoken. Naya's nails dug into her palms as she watched from the shadows. His back straight, his breathing steady. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't afraid. He was deciding. Cole's voice dropped to a hiss. "That woman is Apache. Trouble follows her. You take her in. That trouble's yours." Eli didn't blink. "Then I'll handle it." Naya's eyes burned, not with fear this time, but with the weight of hearing a man speak for her instead of over her. A long, tense moment stretched. Then Cole kicked the bottom of the door, not hard enough to break it, just enough to test it. Eli thumbed the hammer back. "You've got 3 seconds to step away." Cole laughed once. "Or what?" Eli didn't shout. He didn't repeat himself. 1. A shuffle of boots. 2. A quiet curse. Then movement, away from the door. Naya strained to hear. Boots retreating, gravel crunching, something muttered in anger. Cole's voice carried back, distant but sharp. "This ain't over." After a few more seconds, Eli Boone lowered the rifle. He didn't relax. He just drew one slow breath. Naya stepped out from behind the stove, her legs shaking so badly she had to brace herself against the table. Eli turned at once, still holding the rifle, eyes moving over her face, checking for injury, fear, anything he needed to fix. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded too fast. "They know where we are." "Yes," Eli said, "but they won't try that again without thinking." She shook her head. "Eli, he'll come back with more men, maybe with guns. Cole Harlan gets meaner when someone embarrasses him. He isn't the first man to get angry at me." "And he won't be the last," Eli replied. She took a shaky step toward him. Eli didn't move away. She placed her hand on his chest, fingers trembling with leftover adrenaline. "You didn't have to stand for me," she whispered. Eli looked down at her hand, then met her eyes. "Yes," he said softly. "I did." A tear slipped down her cheek, not from fear, but from relief so heavy she couldn't hold it back. Eli lifted his hand, slow and careful, and brushed the tear away with the back of his knuckle. Naya leaned into the touch without thinking. The shirt shifted again with the movement, exposing more of her chest, but Eli didn't take advantage. His thumb only grazed her cheekbone. "You stay close tonight," he said. "Close where I can hear you breathe." She swallowed. "I don't want to be alone." Darkness settled thick and wide over Crosswind Ridge. Inside the cabin, Naya stepped closer until their bodies brushed, their closeness pushing back the cold between them. Eli didn't pull away. The night wasn't over. The danger wasn't gone. But for the first time, Naya wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time in years, Eli didn't want to be alone. Not tonight. Eli Boone didn't sleep at all. He sat in his chair with the rifle across his knees while the fire burned low, eyes fixed on the window where the men had stood hours earlier. Naya slept lightly near the stove, waking at every shift of wind, every creak in the boards. Each time she stirred, Eli murmured a quiet reassurance, never touching her, never crowding, just letting her know he was there. When dawn finally pushed a thin gray light over the ridge, Eli stood, stretching the stiffness from his back. Naya's eyes opened at once. "Did they come back?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but they will." She sat up, pulling Eli's shirt tighter around herself. In the dim morning light, she looked smaller, but stronger than the night before. She had faced fear and survived it. Eli saw that clearly. "Eli," she whispered, "you can't fight them alone. There were at least 3 men. Cole doesn't stop, and he hates being told no." Eli slid a cartridge from the rifle, checked it, then seated it again with a quiet click. "I know the kind of man he is, and I know the kind of men he hires." Naya stood slowly, bare feet on the cold floor. "If he brings more, if he brings guns—" Eli stepped closer, near enough that the warmth of him pushed back the morning chill. "He won't walk off my land again," he said. "Not after last night." She searched his eyes. "And if he does?" Eli didn't hesitate. "Then he doesn't walk away." She swallowed, not because she feared his answer, but because she believed it. Eli Boone wasn't reckless, but once he chose something, he didn't bend. She reached out and touched his arm, her hand shaking. "I don't want you hurt because of me." Eli looked down at her hand, then back to her face. "I lived 9 years alone," he said. "Nothing to lose, nothing to protect, nothing to fight for." His voice dropped. "That changed when you knocked on my woodpile." Naya's breath caught. Her eyes filled, not with panic, but with warmth spreading from her chest to her fingers. Eli stepped closer still, close enough that their chests brushed, close enough she had to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. "This land doesn't feel empty with you here," he said. "This cabin doesn't feel like a grave anymore, and I'm not sending you back into the world alone." She pressed her hand lightly to his chest. "Then let me stay," she said, soft, steady. "Not just for safety, not just for the night. Let me stay because I want to be here." Eli Boone held her gaze, steady and unblinking. "You sure?" "Yes," Naya whispered as she stepped closer. "I choose here. I choose you." The moment settled between them. Quiet, warm, heavy with meaning. Eli lifted a hand to her cheek, the motion slow and careful. Naya leaned into it at once. Their foreheads touched first. Then she tilted her face up, and he lowered his. Their lips met in a slow, deliberate kiss. Nothing hurried. Nothing desperate. Just two people who had been alone too long, finding something solid in each other. His hand slid to the back of her head. Her fingers curled into his shirt as she kissed him again. Deeper this time, letting the fear of the night soften into something steadier, stronger. When they finally drew apart, Naya rested her forehead against his chest, breathing him in. Eli's voice dropped to a quiet murmur. "You stay. That's settled?" She smiled against him, a small sound of relief escaping her. "And the men outside?" she asked. Eli lifted his chin, his expression firm. "I'll deal with them." "Today?" Naya tensed. "Talk first," he said. "Make it clear this place isn't open for their business." His jaw hardened. "If that doesn't work, there are other ways." She reached for his hand and held it tight. "I'll be inside, waiting." He nodded once. "You'll be safe, I swear it." He stepped out with the rifle as the sun rose over Crosswind Ridge. Naya stood by the window, breath tight, watching him cross the yard and disappear towards the northern trail where the men had retreated. She stayed near the stove, waiting, minutes stretching like hours. Then Eli returned, walking slow but steady. The tension had left his shoulders. He hung the rifle on its hook the moment he came in. Naya hurried to him. "It's done," he said simply. Her breath wavered. "Did anyone get hurt?" "No." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "But they won't be back. I made that clear." Her shoulders sagged with relief. She leaned into him, and Eli wrapped an arm around her waist, holding her close in a way that felt like a conclusion rather than a beginning. "What happens now?" she asked softly. He looked around the cabin. The bed, the stove, the half of the room he'd kept untouched for years. Then he looked back at her, eyes gentler. "Now we stop living like guests in the same place." Naya stepped fully against him. "Then make me stay for good." He lifted her chin lightly. "You want that?" "Yes," she whispered. "I want to build a life here, with you, if you'll have me." Eli pulled her into his chest, holding her in a long, deep embrace. "I will." By the spring thaw, the repairs were finished. The land settled into quiet. Naya's belly began to swell. Eli built a cradle with his own hands. Naya folded Jack Boone's shirt and placed it in the shared chest. They stood together one morning in front of the cabin, sunlight warm on their faces. "We should make it official," Eli said, voice low. Naya smiled softly. "I already chose you. But yes, let's call it a marriage. No preacher, no papers, no audience. Just Eli Boone and Naya of the Apache people, standing on solid ground, promising a life without running. A life built on staying. A life built on love that didn't need many words to be real. And in that quiet, steady way, they became a family. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.